a couple of items, one of which I want to let everyone recognize Megan and thank her and her team for today, just the coordination effort. Thank you, as always. As well as between John Donahoe and, the next half hour is an event at the Old Pro in downtown Palo Alto. Upstairs at the Old Pro, if you haven't been up there, it's a very fun gathering, very casual. Hope everyone can be there. We've got the facility upstairs till about 6 p.m. or so. So please join us. If you don't know exactly where it is, it's on Ramona Street, a block off of University in downtown Palo Alto. But anyway, well, we're thrilled to have John join us, and of the things we talked about today, a lot of it was customer acquisition and retention. And, John, as former CEO of eBay, really ran one of the most prolific businesses, marketplace businesses, really at scale. And what always intrigued me is, John joined eBay from a position of being CEO of Bain & Company, very prolific consulting firm. And I've always wanted to ask him, what triggered his decision to join eBay, and tell us about that.
Sure. Is this on? Oh, it is. Hey, Kurt, how you doing? Well, first of all, it's great to be here, and thanks for the great spot at the end of a long day before the bar. I worked with Meg Whitman at Bain in the 80s, and she called me in 2005 and said, John, I don't have a successor. Would you consider coming to work at eBay? And Kurt, you were at eBay at the time, right? And there may be some other eBay alums here. And at the time, eBay was the hottest company on earth, right? It was, you remember back in 2003, 2004, 2005, it was the cat's meow. People were predicting growth was going to go forever. It was the darling of Wall Street, the darling of the media, the darling of pop culture. When Kurt went to cocktail parties, he was cool because he worked at eBay. And it was the ultimate hot company, hot Silicon Valley company. And I said to Meg, I know myself. I'm a lot of things. I'm not hot, and I would not be effective in a hot company. And she said, well, just take half an hour and go meet the founder, Pierre Midyar. And I said, okay. I'd never met someone like Pierre, so I'll never forget. I met him down in San Jose after one of the leaders' meetings that you were probably at, Kurt, rainy day. And I sort of was going in expecting to find this sort of larger-than-life founder figure, right? I saw the picture of Steve Jobs outside, the prototypical big, brash, charismatic founder. And what I found could not have been more different. Mm-hmm. Any of you that have met Pierre know that he is one of the most grounded, humble, clear-eyed human beings I've ever met. And in the course of the conversation, I said to him, so how do you define success, Pierre? What does success look like to you going forward? And it was interesting, without a nanosecond, he did not say anything about revenues, growth, share price. He said, I will define if eBay is successful by how many hundreds of millions of people's lives around the world we can positively impact. That is the scorecard I care about. And I was like, you had me at hello. And Mark, my experience is talented people join organizations for purpose. Mm-hmm. They may ask about money, they may ask about their title, they may ask about role, mm-hmm. But if you can hook the most talented people, they care about the purpose of an organization. And that's sort of how I joined eBay. And my experience over the years when we were successful recruiting people, it was because of the purpose that it had to start there.
So I've heard stories about how you spent your first year. Can you sort of give me your description?
Well, I think any new leader's got to do a lot of listening and a lot of learning. And anytime you come into an organization, it's an opportunity to, with a clean sheet of paper, a fresh set of eyes. So I spent time trying to understand how the organization understood the world. I tried to understand customers. Spent a lot of time with customers. I spent a lot of time with the ecosystem around it. And what I found was there was a disconnect. You remember this, Kurt, there was a massive disconnect. eBay was living a narrative of the past that customers had moved beyond. and customers, how they viewed eBay's products and services was, this is getting increasingly hard to use. I increasingly have some alternatives, and I find them arrogant and difficult to deal with. The inside view of the world is, we're the coolest thing on earth. Yeah, we're raising prices a little bit and tweaking things, but they need us. They don't really have any good choices. And by the way, to tell you how cool we are. Right? I mean, literally, the organization would clap at the end of every meeting. Right? Remember that? True story. It's like, holy shit. This is a disconnect, and this is a symptom of success. Those of you that have worked in companies that have white-hot success, it can happen, and eBay had begun to lose its way. So trapped in its own success, stopped innovating, stopped listening to customers, and started being inside out instead of outside in. And so that was the beginning of an early warning system of what was then to come.
And I know that you made something like 40 acquisitions during your tenure. Was that because the innovation engine slowed down, or you need to bring more talent on board? Can you comment on that?
You know, Mark, it's a little of both. I have found that acquisitions can really help turbocharge innovation. And we used to think about innovation in 3 buckets. One was what I would call innovation that moves the needle, right? Our world. If you improve search, a 0.1%, it moved the needle because it touched all our volume. And PayPal, you improve a risk model a little bit, it moves the needle. And the kind of technologies and the kind of people that know how to drive that scale, core innovation, is one type of people. So we made some acquisitions. Positronics is a business we bought. It was a little search company founded by a guy named Chris Payne. We plugged them right into our core search team. They improved it significantly. It was probably one of the key elements of the turnaround of eBay. And Chris Payne ended up he ran eBay North America at the end. And so I'm going to go through this in case any of you ever think you might want to be acquired, thinking about where you're going to fit into the organization you're going into. Because I used to think about this as a buyer all the time. So that was innovation from the core. The next kind of innovation we had was adjacencies. So this would be buying StubHub or buying some classifieds property. So we bought Bill Me Later from PayPal. And this was an adjacent business where we were buying a business model and a team and hopefully a future revenue stream. And there we're also looking for talent. And in this case, we bought Bill Me Later 10 years ago, and Gary Marino, the founder, now runs PayPal North America. Mark Lavelle, who was their business development leader, ran all the strategy in PayPal for eBay. Tom Keithley ran risk by the end. And so we're buying a business model and the talent. And then the last category of innovation we used to have is disruptive innovation, right? More greenfield innovation. And here, we probably bought 25 different companies that we were buying either some combination of a founder, a team, or a little bit of a technology. And then once they got in, I would always ask, do you want to just cash out and leave? Or do you think joining eBay, if we bought you, or PayPal, you can scale your vision faster? And if I got yes to the latter, we would empower those people to be in key roles. And again, the extreme of this is we bought a little payments company, and I took David Marcus and put him in charge of PayPal because I thought the place needed to be shook up with a disruptive innovator's mindset. And so my experience is different kinds of talents can drive different kind of innovation. And when I was looking for acquisitions, a founder or a CEO that could tell me, here's how we can fit in your company and make it not worth your while to buy us, and we want to stay, that was a big factor. And we ended up, when I left, we had 25 founders who had stayed and were actively working. And I have no doubt they were a key part of the innovation that helped our success. So again, I say that in case any of you are thinking about being acquired someday. Be really clear about where you would fit in and how you can contribute after they buy you. Because a smart CEO will be, of your acquirer, will be looking for that, and it's a way to get a great new career opportunity. I mean, the role you played it into it, right? Right, was huge after you were acquired, and now you get to go on and do something else. I'm talking about Justin, right? Not you, Danny. Yeah, but But how cool is that? You got to do that on a scale, and now you get to go do another thing. But it's been a key part of at least our success.
You know, paraphrasing W. Somerset Maugham, he said there are 3 great rules to finding great leaders, but nobody knows what the rules are. So what do you look for as you've developed this team? It sounds like a bit of it's the internal team you inherited. You acquired a number of talented people. You merged them and grew them into the organization. Are there characteristics that you identified in leaders along the way that really made a difference?
Well, you know, Mark, I'd say 2 things. I'd say one, if you're in a situation you need to change the culture, change the people. So I changed 80 of the top 100 people over the first 5 years because I found really well-intentioned people that had been part of the history, always compared history, the change to history, instead of coming in with an outside-in objective. So I've not been successful ever changing the culture without significantly changing the people. And it's not 100%, but it's a... And then looking for, you know, good leaders, I think there's a bunch of obvious things, but the sort of 2 or 3 things I look for is, does someone have self-confidence and self-awareness? The best leaders understand their strengths and weaknesses, can articulate them, and can build a team around them that compensates for their weaknesses so that they can leverage their strengths. So I think self-awareness. 2, continuous commitment to learning. In my previous role, I had a great chance to meet many CEOs across the world. The best CEOs have unique hunger to learn. The best founders have a unique hunger to learn. I've spent a bunch of time with Brian Chesky. That guy's a fucking learning animal.
Right.
He's like, he's calling me, hey, have you done this? Have you done this? What do you think about that? I'm sucking his brain dry on design, and he's sucking my brain dry on leadership. And so my experience is the more senior you are, the more you need to learn, because the stakes are even bigger. If my learning could have impeded the success of eBay, if I didn't keep learning, I would have ultimately, that would have been a constraint. And that's the same thing with all of you, right? And so the more seasoned you are, the more experienced you are, you've got to keep learning. And no one will care about your learning more than you will. And then 3rd thing, courage. You know, you guys all know this. Ultimately, leaders have to make decisions that no one else can make, right? You know, you've got to set the direction, and no one else can make that call. You've got to upgrade your team. You've got to say, I love this guy and I love this guy. They've really helped me in the last 3 years, but we need to take things to the next level. I need to upgrade. And so you need to have the courage to make those decisions when often they're unpopular.
When we spoke a week or so ago, you mentioned that, you know, leadership is a pretty lonely place. And could you expound on that a little bit and what you meant?
Well, you know, I'll tell a funny story. I got to know Jamie Dimon. You guys know who Jamie Dimon is, right? One of the most confident, clear. I thought, God, this guy is like the CEO right out of Central Casting. And I remember I sat next to him at dinner one time at right when he was getting his ass handed to him by the government. The media was all over him. It was, and I said, so how do you do it? You know, you seem so confident. He said, you don't think I'm up between 2 and 3 a.m. every single night worrying? He said, any CEO that's not up between 2 and 3 a.m. worrying every night is probably not a good CEO. And you know, that probably, and if you're a founder, probably you're up between 2 and 5 a.m., right? So it is lonely, because you're the only one that can be thinking about, all right, what's the ultimate path? What's the ultimate path to success? And often you can't talk about that with your team, because you need your team really focused on the current path. Mm-hmm. And so it's lonely. You got to find resources you can talk to, whether it's your board or outside advisors. It's also lonely for the reason I mentioned earlier. Good leaders constantly upgrade your team. And it's hard to tell someone who's doing a great job, this would never happen to you, but you know, it's like, you've done a great job. It's not about if you're a good person or not a good person, but we're growing. We need to take it to the next level. And I need to upgrade this set of skills. And so constantly upgrading your team is a painful thing. And ultimately your team starts to be wondering, when's he or she going to do it to me? And you know what? That's part of your job. You got to upgrade. Otherwise you won't be able to scale. And so those are the kinds of things that I think, at least for me, has made it lonely. And so you just got to reach out and find. Danny and I are on YPO together, right? That was like my forum was like my personal board of directors, where I could bring business problems or personal problems. And I just encourage you to find a small group of people you trust and build a mutual personal board with each other, so you've got someone that you can bounce things off that you can't do with your team. By the way, boards can be a great source. If you treat them the right way, boards can be a great source of help and support during the lonely times.
One of the things I've been impressed with in John's career is really how he balanced both the work and family demands. Has an extraordinary wife and 4 terrific children. Any words or concepts you want to share? Because I know that's in light of the balances of being a CEO of a very dynamic company. Any ideas you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, marry someone that's smarter than you, better looking, nicer, because that's what I did. We probably like many of you, we had a real partnership. My wife and I met each other in college 34 years ago. And we had a partnership all the way along. We've had dual career for most of the time. As you mentioned, we've had 4 kids who have had experiences with great friends and coaches like you and Mike over the years. And the thing we've always just tried to do is communicate to our kids that we care. We want to have fulfilling careers and a good family, and that it mattered to us, and that there were sacrifices and trade-offs along the way, but we talked about it with them.
I remember talking to Eileen and their youngest son, Kevin, that we had worked with and coached, and I was trying to recruit Kevin to work at GSV a few summers ago, I think after his first year at Dartmouth College, and I was explaining, what fun would be interesting. And then Eileen interjected and she said, well, I really want Kevin to have exposure to non-for-profit and non-for-profit companies. And I said, by the way, we've got a lot of those in our portfolio. So we guarantee him that he'll get that experience. Nonetheless, he was a terrific member of our team. He stopped by a few weeks ago. He's doing extremely well. He's at Palantir for this term. And it really, when you see the quality of the parenting, it really reflects itself well in the kids. So,
can I say one other thing? That your personal life can be the best leadership training you've got. Right? We had kids so young, I didn't know any better. But your kids don't give a shit about your title, right? Your kids tend to be unpredictable. You can't manage them. You've got to somehow lead and inspire them. You got to learn to listen inside of a family. You got to learn to multitask. And so in a strange way, I think my family and my personal life, a lot of the skills I end up having to apply at work, I learned in that setting. And so, and if you understand it that way, it feels a little less zero sum. That this is it's part of the mix.
We wanted to both allow people in this forum to ask any questions. If John could stick around and you wanted to ask him in a less formal manner, or hopefully at the Old Pro. So if folks have some questions, we could field them now or do it in a less formal manner. Go ahead.
What are you doing now?
I'm unemployed. Still haven't gotten the first unemployment check. I'm waiting, but once President Trump's in place, I'm sure it'll come quickly. I'm just taking some time. I haven't had I had my oldest son at 24 years old. I had a kind of 30-year career. I took 2 weeks off between eBay and Bain. And so I've taken the last 6 months off to just enjoy things a little bit. We're empty nest. And now I'm just beginning to think about what's next. And guess what I'm starting with? Purpose. Trying to figure out what's my personal purpose for this next stage of my life. And then how do I find an organization, a platform, an institution? How do I create something that aligns my purpose with that purpose? Because I know if that happens, then size of company, public, private, tech, non-tech, will solve itself. And
So how far are you in?
a week. It was literally a week in. It's funny, I went to this, and it's really easy to give other people career advice. It's like freaking impossible to apply it to yourself. So I have this little office on Sand Hill Road. A buddy of mine's gave it to me, and I go in the first day and like, all right, I'm back from a holiday. I've taken my 6 months off. I'm gonna think about my future. I better check the news again. I think I need another cup of coffee. I realize I'm not going to be able to figure this out on my own. So what am I doing? I'm reaching out to people that have known me for years, people that were in YPO with me or others, and just having a conversation around locking into what's the right sense of purpose, for the next 10 to 20 years of my life, and what are the creative opportunities that where I may be able to live that out.
Go ahead, Ron.
Hey, John, one of my heroes is Tom Tierney, who of course went from Bain to Bridgespan.
Yeah.
Bridgespan is sort of the nonprofit version of Bain. But as you think about how you have you're in the business world, but you also want to positively impact the world without completely separating those things. What are the ways that you saw to kind of build the two things together, as opposed to kind of keep them so separate? Because that sounds kind of like where you're headed.
Yeah, Tom's been my mentor for the last 30 years. Interesting, he was the first person I called, and we spent half a day. The old model used to be, right, have your career, make money, then do philanthropy. And that was, or run a company, maximize profits, and maybe, buy some tables at charity events to give back. And the cool thing about technology and where we are is increasingly those two things can be more integrated, right? Take a business like eBay. We genuinely believed we were improving, giving people economic opportunity and improving the quality of their lives. And it was a purpose that had for-profit motivations, but even larger, it had societal impact motivations. And so I think these technologies that many of you are involved in have if you think about them in a way about how can they impact society, that you can link what you're doing day to day with something broader term. And if you're not in the company you're working for, there are plenty of opportunities adjacent at fairly young ages to do it. And so, interestingly, it's also part of attracting, the current most talented kids coming out of college or out of grad school. They look at the company's purpose and they say, can I, they care about how do I contribute to society while I'm working here? And so we would do things like, if you couldn't do it inside the company, how do you create days? We take a day and go volunteer somewhere, or make volunteering or engaging with other organizations that help them give back to the world really easy and accessible to them. And I think that's, I think it's great. And if we turn the power of Silicon Valley, not just in creating great companies, but also the power of Silicon Valley into how do we improve the quality of the world, I think there's no limit to the upside. And the best talent cares about it.
The things you said at the end, the one that surprised me was you said that when you were thinking about long-term stuff, I heard you say you didn't involve your staff because you wanted them to be focused on the present. Can you comment more about that? Because that seems foreign to me.
Well, I think, Danny, I'd put it this way. An annual strategy process. Yeah, let's constantly look at outside in what are the shifts happening in the external environment. What are competitors doing? What are customers doing? How do we see ourselves? But I became CEO, and I had to decide. We had Skype, eBay, and PayPal. And I had to decide: does that portfolio stay together, or does it go apart? And I had a president of each business. I couldn't think about that with them. So I ended up divesting Skype, and ironically in 2009, the board voted to separate eBay and PayPal because I thought eBay might have been a value trap at the time. I didn't know if we could turn it around. And then I ended up changing my mind. Same thing toward the end. There's just certain decisions that you've got to weigh in your mind that it's hard. You need your team focused on execution. And if they see you contemplating those things, it can be enormously distracting. Same thing with deciding about whether to get rid of somebody. If I tell Mark that I'm thinking of getting rid of or upgrading, it's just so. Yeah.
Well, you may or may not know about this, but PayPal has a internship program for women returning to the workforce.
I think it's a great untapped labor pool, great untapped opportunity of really talented women who may have stepped out partly or fully of the workforce for 10, 20 years because of family or other reasons. Our experience is that we've had mixed success, and the key is the first 3 to 6 months, the reintegration. Because often people come in with skill sets or it takes time to get into the culture, back into the flow, and get the confidence back. Once that happens, we've had some great successes, and I think I don't want to talk too much about it because I think it's a source of competitive advantage if we do it well. But I actually think it fits into one of those societal issues. We all focus so much, at least on the 22-year-old coming out of Stanford, and that's great. But we had a lot of success with people that had a little more experience, people that had been through 2, 3 startups. But, everyone focuses on the one startup that nails it, and no one focuses on the 95 that didn't. And so people that bring some seasoning, some experience, some judgment were among our most effective and successful leaders.
No other questions. We're, again, want to thank John for joining us, and please do meet us over at the Old Pro in downtown Palo Alto. And again, thanks for everybody for their participation today. Great.